Hi, thanks for joining me today. This video will be talking about humanitarian and compassionate application, also known as H&C. This is a very important distinction from an H&C arguments. Humanitarian and compassionate applications can only be submitted if the applicant is physically inside Canada. This is not an application you can submit while you're outside of Canada. Humanitarian and compassionate arguments are arguments that you include or attach to a different application. Let's say spousal sponsorship with H&C arguments, express entry with H&C arguments, etc., etc. But for the purposes of this video, we'll be talking about the application. This is reserved for applicants who really don't have any other avenue to apply. They have exhausted all other avenues, and this is their final resort. Ultimately, similarly like a refugee case. The distinction between refugee and an H&C is persecution. One, with the refugee, you have to demonstrate that if you send me back home, I'm going to be persecuted because, and then you explain. Whereas as an H&C is, I don't want to go back home because it's not necessarily I cannot go back home, but I don't want to go back home. And a lot of times it's because you have nothing back home. You don't have family, you don't have friends, you don't have a job there, you don't speak the language perhaps, you're no longer accustomed to their cultures and social norms of that country because you spend so much time in Canada. And in addition to that application, you want to demonstrate ample ties to Canada, that this is your country, this is where you've been raised or you see as your home country. This is where your friends and your family and your establishments are. This is where you've made a life for yourself. So H&C, and I've wrote it down here, if you narrow it down, is establishments and settlements in Canada. This could be for yourself as well as your dependents. So if you have kids that are going to school, if you have a wife that's working cash money in Canada, all of these documents you want to integrate into the application. You want to demonstrate ties to Canada and no ties to your home country. Also, you want to demonstrate what would happen if you were separated from the family or in the friends and the community establishments you've made in Canada. You have to show the officer what could happen to you if you were placed in your home country. So not only that you've established yourself here, but what would be the consequences if I did take you out and put you into your home country? Perhaps you can demonstrate that you don't speak the language anymore, or you're not accustomed to their culture anymore, etc., etc. You could also mention physical health and mental health stability for yourself. Be careful when you do health because you don't want to tread on that line of medical inadmissibility. You could demonstrate that your physical and mental health will be affected, emotionally affected, if you had to exit the country. Not so much from a medical standpoint that you would be a medical burden, that you need to increase medication, that you'd be hospitalized, more so from an emotional and mental well-being stage. And if you can get letters from psychologists, therapists, maybe you've seen counseling, these are the types of documents that can affirm that you exiting this social group could have severe mental well-being for you. You want to demonstrate that to the officer. Also, hardships that you will face if you were placed in your home country. What type of hardship? A lot of times clients say, well, I have a lot of family here and I just have a sister back home, but I'm not that very close to that sister. That is not necessarily good enough. That's just one angle. You want to make sure you kind of label as many angles as possible. So it's social, it's mental, it's physical, it's ties to Canada, it's perhaps economic, that you cannot go back. there is a lot of angles you want to integrate into the H&C as to why is Canada better for you than it is if you were forced to go back home. Lastly, what I want to emphasize here, unfortunately, kids are not the anchor. A lot of times people think that, but I have a Canadian child, and so therefore, this is a minor child, I need to be here for that Canadian child. That in and of itself is not strong enough for your application to be approved under H&C. That's, remember, one thing you can mention. I have the rule of 5 when I do an H&C application. I like to label 5 things that make Canada better for my clients than it is if it was sent home. So you almost do a comparison in your submission to the officer that this is what my life is and what it looks like in Canada, and this is what my life would be if you send me home. Last thing is for an H&C application, when you get that application submitted, you do not have legal status. It does not give you implied status as some other applications do. So be very careful with that. If you are on a visitor visa or some other status document and you're looking at filing an H&C, make sure you continue to file for extensions for the visit visa and so forth while this is in process. That being said, you can be illegal in Canada and still have a successful H&C, but why make yourself illegal if you have the opportunity of being legal? So keep with the extensions, and if one of the extensions gets refused, it doesn't negatively affect the H&C application. If you're looking at more information for H&C applications, give me a call. Thank you, and until next time.